This is probably the most daunting review I've ever undertaken, purely for size alone. Welcome to Erosion Does Music, where today we're tackling another submission request from my friend Eduardo. We're going to be taking a look at the soundtrack for the video game Persona 5. Admittedly, I know very little about the game. I haven't played it because I don't have a PlayStation, and I haven't even watched much gameplay before undergoing this review. But I did canvas the soundtrack several times. I did watch some videos once I got the commission request, and I tried to educate myself as much as possible without spoiling too much of the game for myself as well. But I'd like to say that what I have here is a pretty solid look at the musical aspect of the game. There's no easy way to review a soundtrack, especially for a video game. I think that even if that's something you specifically do as your job on YouTube or outside of YouTube, it's still a heavy, daunting task. So I just hope that I did this review justice, did the soundtrack justice, and of course, did my friend justice here. I do want to say, depending on what happens when I eventually do play Persona 5, I might revisit this album and this review and take a second look at it in a few ways, but we'll see just as time goes on. I'm actually going to be doing this review a bit differently in terms of structure and overall talking points. This soundtrack is nearly 4 hours long, and it is very hard to talk about every single song and every single moment individually, so I kind of cut this review up into sections. And as far as the actual points of review, I'm going to be talking about how the correlation of the songs to gameplay works, how it coincides and relates to a section of the game that's found within, as well as, of course, the musical quality overall. So, without any further ado, let's get diving into this. Start off with the easiest part of this review, in my opinion. Let's talk about the jingles and other, shorter tracks. As to be expected with a game like this, being a turn-based RPG, there's a lot of short in and out tracks used for a number of events, sides, activities, and just overall stuff like, ending a battle, buying something from a marketplace, so on and so forth. A good example of just a short in your face, out of your face track would be this appropriately named Crane Game, which plays during the Crane Game. These, of course, aren't the world's most impressive pieces of music, but they do serve their job. They get in, get out, again, repeating that phrase so often here in the early goings, and they do exactly what they need to without overstaying their welcome. Sometimes you'll hear like a short jingle within a game, and then you'll end up looking it up in the soundtrack and realize that it's a shorter version of a much longer track, but you never hear that full track, and that whole track feels disconnected in a way because it's like, okay, we really did need the extra 2.5, 3 minutes of that, but it's really gone in blink of an eye. But in that blink of an eye, you got the track's point, you got the jingle's point, it came across in a good way. Even the tracks that fall under a minute or under 30 seconds set the mood or enhance the mood nicely. And I think some personal favorites are Destiny Land and Tanaka's Shady Commodities. These two just feel the most bombastic, and I especially like that I can match the tone of Tanaka's theme to even just his picture. You look at a picture of the guy and you hear the theme and you're like, okay, yeah, this makes sense. Then of course throw in the fact like the gameplay associated with it, and it's one of those tracks that just does all of its work without needing to rely on too many extra elements. There's not much being done to do too much, if that makes sense. Destiny Land as a track, it feels equally near whimsical even, and sounds very similar to a lot of retro video game tracks, along with some other quick little jaunty songs that are found here on the soundtrack. And completely going a flip from quick little, yeah, we're having fun, doing a side mini game, taking a break from all the, serious things going on. There's also the quick little track Accident on Air, which I haven't gotten spoiled for me, and I didn't want to spoil myself too much, but apparently Accident on Air is a song that, or a jingle perhaps, that plays after someone dies horribly on TV. So, I had that in my head and was listening to it, and I was like, okay, this is very much the cutaway, we'll be right back, technical difficulties side of things. And it clicked for me even just with that limited knowledge. It made sense in the fact that I was like, okay, this sort of thing does fit that. Like, you get given a loose description, and then you get the piece of music that's supposed to be associated with it, and it makes sense enough to not detract from it. I will admit that whether it's a shorter song or a longer song, I am probably missing a lot of genuine music to emotion connections by not knowing the exact events that are coinciding with a lot of tracks. Like, I'm not 100% sure what happens with songs like Trick or Unfamiliar Arrogance, but I listen to those tracks and I sort of get a very vague description of what happens with them by reading online or asking my friends, and it still clicks. I'm still able to say, like, say somebody is like, yeah, this plays as the intro of the game plays. The guy's walking down an alley looking at his surroundings, and this is a song associated with it. That song puts me into those shoes. That song puts my head in the right space. The sound design is very indicative of what's going on, and really the genre that Persona 5 soundtrack falls under, according to a lot of separate sources, feels very in line with the general mood. The general mood feels vast. It feels like a widespread of a lot of different things. And the actual name that it's given is acid jazz, which just The words acid and jazz put together feels very varied, feels very, doesn't fit in anything except for its own element. Just like the overall soundtrack doesn't fit in any very like large, already populated group. It feels like it's its own distinction. Just like, acid jazz. The person behind the soundtrack here, Shoji Majuro, understood the assignment fully and connected time and time again, track after track, short, long, medium, a little bit of both. Every single time, the music that he helped put together or put together solely, I did not at any point feel lost, whether I knew what was going on or not. And I just want to end the shorter song section real quick by touching on probably my favorite track out of the section, Erosion. The conveyed emotion and sense of urgency translates perfectly from the actual event this is applied to, relating to the mementos, and it's honestly just a great track in general. The constant beat, the way it feels like it's slowing down and getting faster at the same time, it's intoxicating. It almost induces a sort of anxiety within you, but also keeping you firmly grounded within a certain pace. There are a lot of songs that have initial versions, then alternate or instrumental, or just different versions in general. And I'm not going to touch on every single one of those like every single time, but I do want to mention some moments that do stand above the other versions of themselves. You have different versions of songs like King, Queen, and Slaves or Beneath the Mask, and there's no doubt that, honestly, I think the alternate or just second versions of these songs sometimes and more often than not eclipse the original versions in terms of which one sounds better, which one feels better within its situation. Beneath the Mask is a wonderfully fever-esque moonlight piece that feels perfect for just like a night out on a town, a night out trying to solve something or go about your mission. But the rain edition of it cements the intended mood much better. It strips everything away. It gives it a more grounded and, again, emotional pull to it, and I feel like that version fully eclipses the others. There's 4 total versions of Beneath the Mask, which each adds an extra layer to each rendition. But like I said, rain version of the song, total best effort. The mall music energy that All Right gives off is a tough pick for the better take, but I do think the ELP version takes the cake. It feels less cluttered, and it sums it up right there just by saying that, really. To go against repeating myself, I'm just going to quickly sum up the alternate versions of A Woman, When Mother Was There, Rivers in the Desert, Hoshi to Bakura, sorry, I probably pronounced that way wrong, Escape, and Break It Down are all on equal standing with each other. Now we come to the full-length songs here on the soundtrack. I struggled to find anything close to bad or discouraging or not very good. Like, everything stood out as, at the very least, okay to great and outstanding at times. Songs like Wake Up, Get Out There play in the intro cutscene and set the scene of the game's story with ease, with just natural talent here. This whole soundtrack speaks to just a natural feeling that you can get in your head, and without any struggling, you just know what's happening. You know what's going to be going on. The soundtrack fits it perfectly to a T. Life Will Change is a song that uses a similar structure, and I found that kind of interesting, as Life Will Change actually plays supporting the dungeons in the game, whereas Wake Up, Get Out There is the introduction. So in the introduction, you get a song that sets the scene, brings you in, introduces you to things, and then Life Will Change is sort of the meat in between the sandwich. It's little callbacks to moments like this that add an extra glue and clay to build the overall soundtrack together. Not once did the full-length songs betray the overall tone, mood, and setting of the game just for the sake of making something that was different, something that stood out a little more with more time. Everything fit together like a perfect piece of a puzzle. The game's vibes were never betrayed. The game has plenty of high-impact songs, with personal favorite Blooming Villain coming to mind, like that song. That just got a chef's kiss. Perfection. These aren't just bangers for the sake of being high-energy bangers, because a lot of times you'll get a fantastic song used in the trailer of a song, or just randomly playing during a boss fight, and you'll be like, oh yeah, this is sick, but it's not quite feeling right. It's not quite hitting the exact itch that this boss fight needs. The itches are scratched here. The boss fights are supported, just as well as every other moment in the soundtrack and throughout the game is supported with music that fits the mood. Again, I'm repeating myself so often here, but perfectly. Overall, I think this soundtrack is one of the best video game soundtracks I've ever heard. And again, this is without even playing the game, just getting brief glimpses. Like, I've probably watched maybe a total of 10 hours of gameplay outside of just like looking at like specific boss fights. Like, I watched a couple playthroughs here and there, random moments, and I was able to get a feel for this album and for the game in a way that I think would not be possible with other game soundtracks. If you were to look at my Spotify tracks, you would see, due to this review and just due to being enjoyable enough just to listen to on their own, songs like Beneath the Mask and Blooming Villain, they're just finding their way onto my playlist. They're finding their way into my daily playing routines just for how they stand, not only as pieces of a soundtrack, but good songs on their own, individually. Shoji Majuro and everybody else that was included in the making of this soundtrack and the making of this game in general, brilliant workers, fantastic people with great intentions. They created something truly special. I could play this soundtrack front to back on shuffle or just experience it in different sections throughout my day. This stands at the plateau of game soundtracks, alongside other magnificent selections like Pokemon Platinum, Yakuza 5, the Dragon Quest series. This is one of the GOAT soundtracks. And it's for those reasons, along with the ones I've briefly discussed throughout this review, that Persona 5's soundtrack gets a score of 8.5 out of 10. And that's a review. Let me know what you guys think. This is my first time tackling a soundtrack in a few years. I checked out the American Satan soundtrack a few years ago, and that's one of the reviews I kind of want to go back and redo. But what you guys think? Was there a track that I didn't talk about? I probably skipped a lot of fan favorite tracks just for the sake of keeping this review shorter than a half hour to an hour to 2 hours. Let me know if I missed anything you guys want to talk about. Let's get a discussion going down in the comments. Above all else, have a great day. Stay hydrated. I'll see you next time.